In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, where stars flickered like diamonds scattered on velvet, there existed a coalition of alien civilizations. The Dominion of Tzolk'a, an empire made up of ancient, towering species, had long ruled through fear and overwhelming technological superiority. Across the void, lesser species bowed to their will or were crushed beneath it. Yet there was one species that neither bowed nor was crushed: humanity. The humans had only recently discovered the galaxy, having been content with their home world for centuries. But with the advent of space travel, their desire to explore and expand led them to the stars. They encountered many civilizations, some curious, others hostile. And it was the latter that had come to threaten humanity's place in the galaxy. The Dominion, seeing humans as a nuisance at best and a threat at worst, had made the fateful decision to wipe them from existence. Their fleets, vast and powerful, descended upon Earth with the intent of eliminating every trace of humanity. What they hadn't counted on was humanity's relentless resilience. The first blow came with the surprise attack, a coordinated strike on Earth's orbital defenses. Massive Dominion warships, armed with weapons capable of vaporizing cities in an instant, fired without mercy. Earth's cities burned, and the skies themselves turned black with the smoke of destruction. But humanity wasn't ready to fall. The people fought back, not as soldiers, but as ordinary men and women, engineers, farmers, teachers, doctors. They fought with an ingenuity that the Dominion could never have anticipated. When their enemies thought they had won, humanity's spirit flared to life like a firestorm. In the first battle, humans fought to protect their homes. They used their limited technology in ways that no one expected. Earth's defenders rigged the remnants of fallen satellites into makeshift weapons, striking back with every scrap of firepower they could muster. Each human victory, though small, was a reminder to the Dominion that their plan would not be as easy as they thought. As the Dominion's commanders looked down on Earth from their command ships, they saw an enemy unlike any they had ever faced, an enemy that refused to submit, that fought with desperation and passion. The humans, once thought insignificant, were proving themselves a force to be reckoned with. Commander Zack, a hulking Tzolk'a general known for his ruthlessness, stood on the bridge of the Dominion flagship, staring out into the chaos below. His antennae twitched in frustration. The humans had proven to be unexpectedly difficult to crush. "Activate the Alpha warheads," Zack commanded, his voice like a low growl. "Wipe them from the face of this planet. We'll show them what happens when you defy the Tzolk'a." But as the first missile was launched, a small fleet of human ships intercepted it. The humans had rallied together, banding their forces in a way the Dominion had underestimated. With a defiant fury, they fired back with everything they had, and in the process, managed to cripple the massive warship from which the missile had been launched. Zack's eyes narrowed. He had underestimated the humans, and the consequences were starting to unfold. His fleet had come to Earth thinking it would be a simple matter of eradication. Now, they were facing an enemy that was not only capable of fighting back but seemed to grow more dangerous with every passing hour. As the battles raged on, humanity's leaders met in hidden bunkers, developing new tactics and technologies at a breakneck pace. They refused to let their homes fall. They refused to be defeated. In the midst of the devastation, the spark of a movement was born. A resistance formed, uniting people from all walks of life. Scientists, military veterans, and even the civilians who had nothing but their wits to offer, all came together under one banner. They were united not by strength or numbers, but by an unshakable belief that humanity would not be erased. And so, the war began, one that would span across planets, into deep space, and beyond. The humans were no longer just defending their world, they were fighting for their very survival in a galaxy that underestimated them. The first battle was merely the beginning. The Dominion had thought Earth was an easy target, but what they now faced was a force that would prove to be unstoppable. Humanity, with its indomitable will and unyielding determination, had just begun to show the galaxy that it would not be defeated. The fight for Earth was just the first chapter in a war that would change the course of history, forever altering the balance of power in the galaxy. And no matter how many enemies the humans faced, one thing was certain: they would never stop fighting. the war had taken a brutal toll on Earth. Cities had fallen, landscapes scarred by the fires of war, and countless lives lost. But amidst the devastation, something extraordinary was happening. Humanity was evolving. Commander Zack, after failing to completely subdue Earth's defenses, ordered the deployment of the Tsul'ka's most powerful weapon, an unrelenting wave of destruction meant to break the will of the human spirit. Massive bombardments and brutal ground invasions spread across the planet. The Tsul'ka were confident that this time, humanity would finally break. However, what they didn't account for was the sheer unpredictability of human resolve. In the midst of the chaos, a new movement began to form, a unity never before seen among the human forces. The leaders of this resistance were drawn from every corner of Earth, a mixture of military tacticians, rebel leaders, and brilliant scientists. Chief among them was Sarah Novak, a former fighter pilot who had survived the initial bombardment and lost everything she loved. Now, with nothing left to lose, she became one of the fiercest voices in the resistance. Sarah's resolve was simple: fight to the last, no matter the cost. But what truly made her dangerous was her ability to inspire others. She spoke of not just survival, but of revenge, of reclaiming the Earth and making the Tsul'ka regret ever setting foot on it. Humanity's retaliation came in waves. At first, it was small, guerrilla-like strikes. Armed with scavenged technology and fierce ingenuity, humans sabotaged Tsul'ka supply lines and ambushed their ground forces. Each strike, no matter how small, carried the weight of vengeance and defiance. The Tsul'ka commanders, initially dismissive of these sporadic attacks, were soon forced to take them seriously. The turning point came when Sarah Novak and her team managed to infiltrate a high-ranking Tsul'ka command ship. It was a daring mission, one that no one thought possible. But with precision and brutal determination, they succeeded in planting a virus in the Dominion's central command system, a virus that crippled the Tsul'ka's coordination and communications for several critical days. The Tsul'ka, in their arrogance, had believed their advanced technology could keep them one step ahead of the humans. Now, for the first time since the war began, they found themselves blind to their enemies' movements. The humans took full advantage of this opportunity, launching coordinated attacks on Dominion supply depots, weak points in their defenses, and even Tsul'ka homeworlds. As human forces gained ground, the Dominion began to feel the weight of their own overconfidence. Zack's command ship, though still massive and terrifying, had been forced to retreat after suffering severe damage from a surprise human ambush. The Tsul'ka were no longer the untouchable conquerors, they were vulnerable, and that vulnerability was being exploited by humanity's ever-growing forces. Sarah Novak became a symbol of resistance. She was no longer just a leader, she was an icon of everything the humans stood for. Her face appeared on posters and holo ads across Earth and beyond, her speeches broadcast to the farthest corners of the galaxy. She spoke of strength in the face of annihilation, of courage when all seemed lost. And more importantly, she spoke of the undeniable truth that humanity would not be erased. With Sarah's leadership, humanity had begun to organize into an unstoppable force. The resistance had transformed into a fully functioning military entity, its armies now supported by sophisticated weaponry and technology developed by Earth's best minds. Humans who had once struggled to hold their ground now advanced with precision, taking the fight to the Tsul'ka in ways they had never imagined. But even as humanity took back territory and began to push the Tsul'ka off Earth's surface, Zack refused to acknowledge defeat. He was a Tsul'ka of pride, and he would never accept a setback without doing everything in his power to reverse it. As he rallied his forces for a final, massive counteroffensive, the Dominion leaders began to question whether they had underestimated the humans' potential. Zack was not alone in this belief. Across the Dominion, whispers began to grow about the true nature of humanity, a species that could survive, adapt, and fight harder than any other. But for now, Zack and the Tsul'ka were still convinced that Earth would fall. And though they were losing ground, they weren't prepared for what would come next. Humanity had just begun to push back the tide. The war was no longer one of survival, it had become a war of retribution. And in this war, humanity would prove that the Tsul'ka were not the only unstoppable force in the galaxy. The relentless human assault on the Tsul'ka forces had begun to turn the tide of war in Earth's favor. The Dominion, once an unstoppable empire, was now on the defensive, their fleets scattered across the galaxy, their ground forces dwindling. The humans, driven by their thirst for vengeance and their unyielding will to survive, had begun pushing deeper into Tsul'ka territory. But Commander Zack, though battered and bruised, was not one to yield so easily. His pride as a Tsul'ka warrior was shattered, but his resolve remained as solid as ever. The idea of losing to a lesser species was anathema to him. He would fight to the bitter end. Zack's counteroffensive, however, was not just about reclaiming the territory lost to humanity, it was a message. He ordered the deployment of a new, terrifying weapon, something that had been kept in the darkest corners of the Dominion's vast military apparatus, the Annihilator Protocol. The Annihilator Protocol was an ancient weapon, buried in the records of the Dominion's history. A weapon capable of wiping out entire populations in an instant, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war in the blink of an eye. Its origins were a mystery, but its power was undeniable. Zack believed that its use could break humanity's resolve once and for all. The Annihilator was a colossal orbital station, a construct of dark metal and pulsing energy. It was armed with devastating energy cannons, each capable of obliterating entire cities. But it was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a symbol, a terrifying reminder of the Dominion's authority, and Zack intended to use it to send humanity a clear message: submit or perish. As the weapon loomed in the dark expanse of space, Sarah Novak and her team intercepted intelligence about the Annihilator's impending launch. It was not just a weapon, it was a death sentence for millions of innocent people, a weapon designed to eliminate all resistance in one stroke. The news sent shockwaves through the human forces. Sarah stood before a massive holographic display, her gaze focused on the data that flickered before her. The Annihilator was nearly ready. If they didn't act fast, it would be the end. "We can't let them launch that weapon," Sarah said, her voice cold with determination. "We stop it now, or we lose everything." Her words were met with grim nods. It was a suicide mission. No human force could stand against such a weapon. But the resistance, the armies, the people who had fought for survival, they had nothing left to lose. They would fight. They would die, if it meant stopping the Annihilator. Sarah gathered a team of elite operatives, pilots, soldiers, engineers, each of them willing to risk everything. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the Annihilator, disable its systems, and destroy it before it could be fired. The journey to the Annihilator was perilous. The station was protected by an armada of Tsul'ka warships, each of which had orders to ensure that no human could get close. But Sarah's team was not deterred. They broke through the blockade with precision strikes, using hit-and-run tactics to cripple the Tsul'ka's defenses and force their way into the heart of the Annihilator. As they boarded the massive station, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the weapon. It was a beast, its dark corridors humming with power, its engines thrumming with energy. But it was not invulnerable. It was a machine, and machines could be destroyed. The team moved with military precision, their every step a calculated risk. They planted explosive charges on key systems, disabled power grids, and fought their way through waves of Tsul'ka soldiers who would stop at nothing to protect their prize weapon. Sarah's heart raced as she and her team reached the central control room. The final countdown had already begun. The Tsul'ka were preparing to fire. But they were not alone. Zack, furious at the audacity of the humans, had arrived to oversee the launch. He stood in the control room, his massive form a dark shadow against the glowing interface. "You dare defy me?" Zack's voice was low and dangerous, a growl that vibrated through the room. "You think your lives mean anything in the grand scheme of this war?" Sarah met his gaze, unwavering. "We'll make you regret ever underestimating us." In that moment, the war between the Tsul'ka and humanity reached its boiling point. Sarah and Zack locked eyes, two forces of nature, bound by the will to survive and destroy. The final battle was upon them. With seconds left on the countdown, Sarah initiated the final phase of the operation. Explosives detonated across the Annihilator, disrupting the power core. Systems began to fail, and the weapon's energy shield flickered. But as Zack's soldiers closed in, the tension in the room reached a fever pitch. This was the moment that would define the war. In the distance, humanity's forces rallied, knowing that this would be their last chance to strike. They could not afford failure. And as the Annihilator's core began to destabilize, the entire station shuddered under the strain. It was a battle for the galaxy's future, and in the next few moments, one side would either rise victorious or fall to oblivion. The relentless human assault on the Tsul'ka forces had begun to turn the tide of war in Earth's favor. The Dominion, once an unstoppable empire, was now on the defensive, their fleets scattered across the galaxy, their ground forces dwindling. The humans, driven by their thirst for vengeance and their unyielding will to survive, had begun pushing deeper into Tsul'ka territory. But Commander Zack, though battered and bruised, was not one to yield so easily. His pride as a Tsul'ka warrior was shattered, but his resolve remained as solid as ever. The idea of losing to a lesser species was anathema to him. He would fight to the bitter end. Zack's counteroffensive, however, was not just about reclaiming the territory lost to humanity, it was a message. He ordered the deployment of a new, terrifying weapon, something that had been kept in the darkest corners of the Dominion's vast military apparatus, the Annihilator Protocol. The Annihilator Protocol was an ancient weapon, buried in the records of the Dominion's history. A weapon capable of wiping out entire populations in an instant, a weapon that could turn the tide of the war in the blink of an eye. Its origins were a mystery, but its power was undeniable. Zack believed that its use could break humanity's resolve once and for all. The Annihilator was a colossal orbital station, a construct of dark metal and pulsing energy. It was armed with devastating energy cannons, each capable of obliterating entire cities. But it was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a symbol, a terrifying reminder of the Dominion's authority, and Zack intended to use it to send humanity a clear message: submit or perish. As the weapon loomed in the dark expanse of space, Sarah Novak and her team intercepted intelligence about the Annihilator's impending launch. It was not just a weapon, it was a death sentence for millions of innocent people, a weapon designed to eliminate all resistance in one stroke. The news sent shockwaves through the human forces. Sarah stood before a massive holographic display, her gaze focused on the data that flickered before her. The Annihilator was nearly ready. If they didn't act fast, it would be the end. "We can't let them launch that weapon," Sarah said, her voice cold with determination. "We stop it now, or we lose everything." Her words were met with grim nods. It was a suicide mission. No human force could stand against such a weapon. But the resistance, the armies, the people who had fought for survival, they had nothing left to lose. They would fight. They would die, if it meant stopping the Annihilator. Sarah gathered a team of elite operatives, pilots, soldiers, engineers, each of them willing to risk everything. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the Annihilator, disable its systems, and destroy it before it could be fired. The journey to the Annihilator was perilous. The station was protected by an armada of Tsul'ka warships, each of which had orders to ensure that no human could get close. But Sarah's team was not deterred. They broke through the blockade with precision strikes, using hit-and-run tactics to cripple the Tsul'ka's defenses and force their way into the heart of the Annihilator. As they boarded the massive station, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the weapon. It was a beast, its dark corridors humming with power, its engines thrumming with energy. But it was not invulnerable. It was a machine, and machines could be destroyed. The team moved with military precision, their every step a calculated risk. They planted explosive charges on key systems, disabled power grids, and fought their way through waves of Tsul'ka soldiers who would stop at nothing to protect their prize weapon. Sarah's heart raced as she and her team reached the central control room. The final countdown had already begun. The Tsul'ka were preparing to fire. But they were not alone. Zack, furious at the audacity of the humans, had arrived to oversee the launch. He stood in the control room, his massive form a dark shadow against the glowing interface. You dare defy me? Zack's voice was low and dangerous, a growl that vibrated through the room. You think your lives mean anything in the grand scheme of this war? Sarah met his gaze, unwavering. We'll make you regret ever underestimating us. In that moment, the war between the Tsul'ka and humanity reached its boiling point. Sarah and Zack locked eyes, two forces of nature, bound by the will to survive and destroy. The final battle was upon them. With seconds left on the countdown, Sarah initiated the final phase of the operation. Explosives detonated across the Annihilator, disrupting the power core. Systems began to fail, and the weapon's energy shield flickered. But as Zack's soldiers closed in, the tension in the room reached a fever pitch. This was the moment that would define the war. In the distance, humanity's forces rallied, knowing that this would be their last chance to strike. They could not afford failure. And as the Annihilator's core began to destabilize, the entire station shuddered under the strain. It was a battle for the galaxy's future, and in the next few moments, one side would either rise victorious or fall to oblivion. The destruction of the Annihilator had struck a blow to the Dominion's war effort, but Sarah Novak and the human resistance knew they could not afford to rest. The Tsul'ka were wounded but far from defeated, and the galaxy would not wait for humanity to catch its breath. Humanity's push into the stars continued as they fought to liberate the planets under Dominion rule. The resistance now had the momentum, and they seized every opportunity to strike, launching swift raids across Dominion-held territories. It was no longer just about Earth, it was about the entire galaxy. And humanity was determined to take its place among the stars. Sarah stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, her eyes scanning the areas marked in red. These were the Dominion strongholds, key systems that controlled trade routes, military production, and the Tsul'ka's remaining resources. She knew that if the resistance could take them, they would cripple the Dominion's ability to fight back. We need to hit them where it hurts, Sarah said to her command staff, her voice hard with resolve. These worlds are their lifeblood. If we take them, we cripple their ability to wage war. We need to hit fast, hit hard, and keep pushing forward. Her words galvanized the human forces. Every planet they liberated was another victory, another step closer to freedom. But even as humanity's resolve grew stronger, so did the Dominion's fury. Commander Zack, humiliated by his defeat, was not ready to give up the fight. He had retreated to a secret Tsul'ka stronghold, gathering reinforcements, and plotting his next move. On a distant planet in the Tsul'ka's inner territories, Zack stood before a war council, his mind simmering with rage and pride. The fall of the Annihilator had been a devastating blow, but it had also awakened something inside him, a fierce determination to restore the Dominion's honor. We will crush these humans, Zack snarled, his fists clenched at his sides. They are nothing but ants, scurrying underfoot. We have the power to burn their worlds to ash. They will learn that defying the Dominion comes with a cost. But Zack knew that he couldn't fight humanity alone. He had to rally the other Dominion factions, some of which had grown disillusioned with their empire's long-standing rule. A coalition of alien species, once subjugated by the Tsul'ka, had begun to rise up, and it was time for Zack to remind them why the Dominion had ruled supreme for so long. There is no mercy, Zack growled. We will reclaim what is ours. The first of the major battles in the Dominion's heartland began as a small human fleet, led by Sarah Novak, entered the system of Zorner 3, a key military world for the Dominion. The human forces, though smaller, were well coordinated, striking with surgical precision, targeting supply lines, military bases, and key planetary defense systems. Sarah's fleet deployed under the cover of darkness, slipping through Dominion defenses with stealth technology and tactics that had been honed in the harshest conditions. They struck fast and vanished before the Tsul'ka could organize a response. The operation was a success, and the Dominion forces on Zorner 3 were quickly overwhelmed by the human onslaught. As the ground battle raged, Sarah watched from her flagship as human soldiers fought bravely in the streets of Zorner's capital, liberating its citizens and driving the Tsul'ka into retreat. The Dominion's hold on the planet began to fracture, but it was clear that Zack had ordered reinforcements to arrive. This was just one battle, but it would not be the last. The Tsul'ka retaliated with all their might, launching a devastating counterattack. What followed was the bloodiest space battle yet. The Dominion's fleets arrived in full force, overwhelming the humans in sheer numbers. The tide of battle shifted back and forth as human forces fought to hold their ground against superior firepower. Sarah's flagship, the Perseverance, was caught in the crossfire. Energy blasts rocked the ship as it exchanged fire with Dominion dreadnoughts. On the bridge, Sarah and her crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship intact, even as it took heavy damage. "We're not backing down," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We hold this position, or we die trying." With each passing hour, the human resistance proved that their will to survive was unbreakable. Human ships, despite being outnumbered, launched daring counterattacks, using guerrilla tactics to wear down the Tsul'ka fleet. Ships that were once thought of as scrap were now vital weapons in the fight for the galaxy. Finally, after days of intense combat, the Tsul'ka fleet began to retreat, their forces shattered. Zorner 3 had been liberated, and its victory sent a ripple of hope through the galaxy. The Dominion, however, had not given up. Their defeat on this world was just another chapter in a much larger war, but it had shaken their confidence. With Zorner 3 secured, humanity turned its eyes toward the next target, the heart of the Dominion's power, the Tsul'ka homeworld of Raxen. It was a planet teeming with Tsul'ka military bases, command centers, and the very symbol of their dominance. To strike at Raxen was to challenge the Dominion directly, and humanity was ready to take that challenge. Sarah knew that this would be the final battle. The humans had taken Zorner 3, but Raxen was where the war would be won or lost. They would need every last ounce of strength, every strategy they had, to make it through the Tsul'ka defenses. But Sarah wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "We end this now," she said, looking out over her fleet, ready to make the jump to Raxen. "No more running. We take the fight to them." As humanity's forces prepared for the final push into the heart of enemy territory, the stars above seemed to echo with the promise of victory. No matter the cost, humanity would prove that it was a force the galaxy could never forget, a force that would not be defeated. The battle for the galaxy's future was about to reach its most crucial turning point. Raxen, the Tsul'ka homeworld, loomed large on the horizon, a massive, gleaming orb, its surface dotted with colossal military structures and the remnants of ancient Tsul'ka cities. To the humans, it represented not only the heart of the Dominion but also the final test of their resilience. After everything they had endured, the Resistance knew that this would be the battle to end all battles. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Sarah Novak stood at the helm of the human flagship, the Perseverance, staring at the holographic map of Raxen as her officers prepared for the siege. This was it, the final push. If they could take Raxen, the Dominion would crumble. But if they failed, humanity's hope would die along with them. "All forces, report in," Sarah commanded. Her voice was steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. This wasn't just another battle, it was the culmination of everything they had fought for, the last stand of a species determined to secure its place in the stars. One by one, reports came in from the fleet. Thousands of human ships had gathered in orbit around Raxen, prepared to launch a full-scale assault on the Tsul'ka's strongest bastions. Sarah's eyes flickered over the names of the commanders and the soldiers under her command. Each person knew what was at stake, and each was ready to lay down their life if it meant victory. "We break their defenses, we take the planet," Sarah said to her crew. "No retreat, no surrender." The human fleet descended on Raxen like a storm, cutting through the Tsul'ka's outer defenses with ruthless precision. Raxen's skies erupted with energy blasts as Dominion ships launched into space to defend their homeworld. The battle was intense, and the space above Raxen became a swirling chaos of exploding ships, flares of light, and the constant rumble of destruction. But the Tsul'ka were not the only ones with formidable weapons. Humanity's fleet, though smaller in number, was agile and relentless, using every trick they had learned in their years of resistance. Their ships weaved through enemy fire with expert precision, striking at vulnerable targets and tearing apart the Tsul'ka's outer defense platforms. On the surface of Raxen, the battle raged as well. Human ground forces stormed the planet's surface, engaging in brutal combat with Tsul'ka soldiers who fought with fierce determination. The Tsul'ka had turned Raxen into a fortress, and its defenses were formidable. But humanity's resolve was stronger. As Sarah's forces advanced, the resistance pushed deeper into the heart of the planet, targeting the Tsul'ka's most vital infrastructure, their military factories, command centers, and the deep bunkers where the Dominion's ruling class lived. With every victory, more Tsul'ka were driven from their positions. Yet, the deeper they pressed, the more vicious the counterattacks became. "I don't think they're going to give up easily," Sarah said to her second-in-command, Commander Jack Riker, as they watched the ground battle unfold from a tactical operations room aboard the Perseverance. "No," Riker replied, his eyes narrowed with determination. "But neither are we." Zack, still reeling from the loss of the Annihilator, had retreated to Raxen to regroup and rally the remaining Dominion forces. He watched from a command center as human forces poured onto his homeworld, relentless in their assault. His pride had been shattered with the destruction of his greatest weapon, but he was still a warrior, a Tsul'ka, and he would not let his people fall without a fight. "They dare to step foot on Raxen," Zack muttered to himself, his claws flexing in frustration. "They will pay for their insolence." He activated a series of tactical commands, ordering a full mobilization of the remaining Dominion warships. Despite the heavy casualties, he still had a fleet capable of inflicting massive damage on the humans. It was time to take the fight to the enemy in a final, decisive strike. The battle escalated as Zack launched a series of counterattacks, driving back humanity's forces for a time. His Tsul'ka warriors were relentless, and his fleet wreaked havoc on human ships, causing heavy losses. The fight above Raxen was like a massive, brutal chess game, each side pushing and pulling for dominance. Despite the setbacks, Sarah refused to falter. She knew what was at stake. The resistance had come too far, had sacrificed too much, to let Raxen fall back into Tsul'ka hands. She rallied her commanders, sending out reinforcements to hold the line and pushing forward with a final assault on the Dominion's central command. "Now's our chance," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos of the battlefield. "We break through their lines, and we hit them where it hurts." Human forces launched a final push toward Raxen's capital, where Zack and the remaining Dominion leadership were holed up in a heavily fortified citadel. The final assault was brutal, with every inch of ground contested fiercely by Tsul'ka soldiers who fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. But Sarah and her forces were unrelenting. They breached the citadel's outer defenses, and the battle inside the stronghold became a bloody melee. Sarah fought alongside her troops, her blade flashing as she cut through Tsul'ka forces with precision and fury. Every strike was driven by the memory of those lost, by the people of Earth, and by the conviction that humanity's survival was on the line. In the heart of the citadel, Sarah finally confronted Zack. The Tsul'ka general stood before her, battered but not broken, his eyes burning with hatred and pride. "You think you've won, human?" Zack snarled, his claws flexing, ready for combat. "No," Sarah replied, her voice steady as she gripped her weapon. "But we will." The final battle between Sarah Novak and Commander Zack was a clash of two forces, human determination against Tsul'ka pride. They fought fiercely, their every move a deadly dance of destruction. Zack's strength and brutality were matched only by Sarah's speed and precision. Each blow they exchanged reverberated with the weight of the war that had consumed their worlds. Finally, with a swift strike, Sarah incapacitated Zack, sending him crashing to the ground. She stood over him, her weapon raised, but she didn't finish him off. "Not yet. This ends here," Sarah said, her voice calm. "Raxen is ours." The siege of Raxen was over. With Zack's defeat and the fall of the Tsul'ka leadership, the Dominion's grip on the galaxy began to crumble. The last remnants of their once mighty empire scattered in the wake of humanity's relentless advance. Humanity had won, but the cost had been high. Raxen was a graveyard of both human and Tsul'ka lives, and as Sarah looked out across the battlefield, she knew the war was far from over. But one thing was clear, humanity had proven it would not be defeated. And with Raxon's fall, the galaxy knew that humanity was a force that would never be underestimated again. The stars were theirs to take. The battle for Raxon had raged for days, and as the final Tzolk'ah strongholds crumbled beneath the weight of humanity's will, the galaxy stood on the brink of a new era. The once mighty Dominion had been brought to its knees, its leaders scattered, and its empire shattered. But the cost of victory was heavy. The battlefields of Raxon were littered with the remains of both human and Tzolk'ah forces, and the survivors could only look at the devastation and wonder what came next. Sarah Novak, battered but unbroken, stood at the edge of the Tzolk'ah citadel, staring out at the wreckage of the war. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with blood and dust, but her eyes burned with the quiet strength of a leader who had led her people through the darkest of times. Her thoughts were interrupted as Commander Jack Riker approached, his face grim but resolute. "We did it," Riker said quietly, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's over." Sarah didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked out at the horizon, where the human fleet was slowly but steadily withdrawing from Raxon's surface. The damage was extensive, but they had done what they set out to do. The Dominion was no more. "I know," she said finally. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." In the aftermath of the siege, Earth and its allies began the monumental task of rebuilding. The Tzolk'ah were no longer a threat, but the galaxy was far from peaceful. There were still factions loyal to the old regime, remnants of the Dominion scattered across distant planets. However, with Raxon's fall, those loyalists found themselves without leadership, their unity crumbling under the weight of defeat. Humanity's forces took the opportunity to forge new alliances. Many of the alien species that had been oppressed by the Tzolk'ah saw humanity's victory not as a conquest but as a turning point. The once fractured alliances between species began to solidify as humans led the charge for a new galactic order, one built on cooperation, freedom, and mutual respect. Sarah Novak, though hailed as a hero, knew that her role had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, and its people were diverse. She would need to work with her fellow leaders to ensure that peace would follow the destruction of the Dominion. But for now, Sarah took a moment to stand still, her eyes closed, breathing in the quiet that had followed the storm of war. It was a rare moment of peace, and she allowed herself to savor it. The United Earth Republic, the name now adopted by the coalition of human and allied worlds, began to take the lead in forming the new Galactic Council. Representatives from the liberated worlds gathered, including the once subjugated species of the Tzolk'ah, who had witnessed firsthand the power of unity over oppression. The council was to be a place where conflicts would be resolved through dialogue, not war, and where the lessons of the past would guide the future. Humanity's role as peacemakers, defenders of the oppressed, and protectors of the galaxy had earned them respect. But Sarah understood that true peace would take time, and rebuilding would not be without its challenges. Old wounds would need to heal, and new leaders would rise to challenge the fragile alliance. Still, Sarah believed that humanity's spirit, the same spirit that had carried them through the war against the Dominion, would see them through these trials. They were a species that had once been on the brink of extinction, and now they stood at the forefront of a new era. The victory over the Tzolk'ah was not just a win for humanity, it was a win for the galaxy. Months later, Sarah sat in the Grand Council chamber aboard the human flagship, the Perseverance, as representatives from various worlds discussed the path forward. The debate was intense, but there was an underlying sense of hope, a collective drive to forge a future better than the one that Tzolk'ah had tried to impose. In the midst of the discussion, Sarah's mind wandered for a moment. She thought of her fallen comrades, the soldiers, the civilians, the countless lives lost along the way. It had been a hard fight, but it had been worth it. The galaxy had been changed forever by the actions of a single species, humanity. And as the Council voted to establish the Galactic Pact, a peace agreement that would unite the galaxy in a new era of collaboration and mutual defense, Sarah knew one thing was certain: humanity would never again be underestimated. They had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, a force that would never be defeated. And now, as the final votes were cast and the agreement sealed, Sarah Novak stood at the head of the council, a new generation of leaders rising behind her, ready to ensure that the galaxy would be a place where freedom, justice, and hope would endure. The war was over. The stars were no longer a battleground. They were a new frontier, a frontier that humanity, together with their allies, would explore and shape. For the first time in the galaxy's history, the human race was not fighting to survive. They were fighting to thrive. The dawn of a new era had arrived. As Sarah looked out at the stars once more, she knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, always new obstacles to overcome. But humanity had proven its place among the stars, and no force in the galaxy would ever forget the day they learned that humanity would never be defeated.